This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome back to our training videos for Duct Quote, our 3D design and quoting tool here at US Duct. And we are going to have our first in the quote more advanced usage sequences here. We're going to talk about adding equipment and models. Now, in the last segment, you learned how to have Duct Quote calculate or size your system in automatic mode, and that is based on the target velocity and the volume related to the duct diameter at the open ends of the drops. Now, the other mode of calculating or sizing is manual, and that is based on the connection or port sizes and characteristics on equipment you connect to your duct in your system. Now, this requires manually adding the equipment and then defining the size, location, and the flow characteristics of each port or connection. Well, before we actually build a system with equipment, we'll need to understand first about the two types of equipment you can use in DuctQuote. They're machines and inline devices, or ILDs. We'll also need to understand the difference between a model and a piece of equipment. So I'm going to quickly just create a layout that we can look at these in. We'll just call it Training 2. All right, so models first, found right here. Models are what you might call dumb 3D models. It's all they are. They're officially for display only. Once you put them into your layout, other than move them around, that's all you can do with them. Equipment, on the other hand, seen here on the equipment button, it can have connections, ports added to them, and therefore it can help define the pressure calculations. Now, the difference between the two types of equipment, machines and ILDs, is when you add a connection to a machine, there's only one direction of airflow allowed, and that is out of the machine. In other words, it's an outlet. And attempting to connect duct with airflow going into the machine, the connection will fail. Now, when you add a connection to an inline device, or ILD, you're going to be prompted whether you're going to be adding an outlet, the air out of the device, or an inlet, air going into the device. And it's important to remember that you're only able on an ILD to add a maximum of one inlet and or one outlet. So let's start by adding a model. Okay, we're just going to go up here to the model, click that, and then we can select. You can see that there are quite a few available here from different manufacturers. We're just going to pick one right here. And once I've selected the model, I can click OK, and you will see now an insertion point. As I move my cursor around, the insertion point where I'm going to put this reads out the X and Z coordinates. So let's stick it right over there in the corner. Once I have the cursor where I want it, I click and bang. I get a nice looking model of a collector. Okay. Now, if in edit mode I select this, you'll notice that over here there are no controls whatsoever other than I can apply a label. Okay. So we can say that this is our collector. Well, other than moving it around, as you can see, we can move it. That's pretty much all we can do is put a label on it and move it. Now, if in fact I were to put in a piece of equipment, and you can see there are some companies that have given us full equipment to add as well, I'm just going to use a generic. And the generic is simply asking me, is it going to be an inline device or a machine? Well, we'll put an inline device next to that model. You can see there's not a lot of excitement there. But then just for comparison, let's put a machine next to that as well. Now, The machine is a little bit taller. They're different sizes just so that it's easier for you to tell quickly by looking what you've added. Now, that is only as they're initially added. Watch what we can do though. Again, in edit mode, if I select the ILD, we have controls over here. I can control the mounting, and if you hover over, anytime you see that question mark in a circle, that's a help button. You can just hover over it and it'll explain what the values are. But basically, standing means it will always search out the floor. Hanging, on the other hand, means that it will stay wherever we put it. Okay. We can also control its size in the 4 different dimensions, X, Y, and Z. We can control its shape. And we can control its color. So let's say that we want to make this one bright green. Okay. We can also control whether or not you see through it. And of course, we can do labels. We can add connections. And again, this is an ILD. Remember, it will ask us whether we're creating an inlet or an outlet. Now, with a machine adding connections, we are not asked about inlet or outlet. We are only able to create outlets on a machine. Now, in our next session, we are going to be going much more in depth into how we might add connections on these. But for right now, we are able to add these as representations. That's what a model will do for you, a representation of that particular piece of equipment. Or we can add inline devices for things like inline fans, spark traps, things of that nature. And then we have machines. And again, both of these we can control their shapes and sizes and colors and so forth. But again, the difference is with an inline device, we can add 1 outlet and 1 inlet. With machines, we can only add outlets, but we can add as many as we want. Now, in our next session, we're going to take these two and we're going to add connections, and we're going to talk exactly how those are used to size duct. So thanks for listening, and look to see you back here very soon.